The afternoon sun painted the sky orange over New. Captain Park stood in his small backyard, watching his daughter blow out 7 candles on her birthday cake. His wife laughed and clapped her hands. Neighbors gathered around the table, and children ran through the grass playing games. It was a perfect day on a perfect world. New was humanity's pride. A colony of 2.3 million people living on a green planet far from Earth. Farmers grew rice in the valleys. Scientists studied alien plants in the mountains. Families built homes and dreamed of the future. The colony was only 40 years old, but it already felt like home to everyone who lived there. Picked up his daughter and held her close. She smelled like cake and sunshine. "What did you wish for?" he asked. Pressed her finger to her lips. "I can't tell you, or it won't come true." "Fair enough," said, smiling. His communicator beeped. He looked at the screen and saw an urgent message from the Colony Defense Center. Strange readings in orbit. Unknown ships. "I have to go check something," he told his wife. "Save me some cake." Nodded, but her eyes showed worry. She knew that look on his face. Drove to the defense center as fast as he could. When he arrived, young officers were running between screens and shouting numbers. The main display showed dozens of red dots dropping out of hyperspace above their world. "How many ships?" asked. "Over 200, sir," said Lieutenant O, his voice shaking. "They're not responding to any communication. They're not broadcasting any identification." Colony administrator rushed into the room. She was a tall woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had led New for 15 years and had never seen anything like this. "Are they?" she asked. "We think so," said. "The ship designs match their profile." Felt ice form in his stomach. The Dominion was known across the galaxy. Insect-like beings who believed they were the supreme species. They had conquered and destroyed 12 civilizations. They viewed all soft-skinned species as insects to be crushed. "Get Earth on the line," ordered, "and start evacuating people to the deep shelters." But there was no time. The first bombs fell before the sirens could sound. Bright lights streaked down from the sky and hit the capital city. Buildings exploded. Streets turned to fire. The ground shook so hard that fell to his knees. Then came the gas. Yellow clouds rolled through the streets, spreading from the bomb craters. People who breathed it fell to the ground, their bodies twisting in pain. They weren't just attacking, they were exterminating. Grabbed the communication console with bloody hands. A piece of the ceiling had cut her forehead. "This is Colony Administrator of New. We are under attack by forces. They are using chemical weapons on civilians. We need immediate help. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help." She repeated the message over and over until the communication tower was destroyed. Ran outside. The sky was full of fire. Drop ships were landing everywhere and soldiers poured out, shooting everything that moved. Their weapons made a sound like screaming metal. He tried to reach his home. He ran through streets filled with bodies and smoke. He saw neighbors he had known for years lying dead on the ground. He saw children who had been playing at his daughter's party just an hour ago. When he reached his street, his house was gone. Only a burning crater remained. Fell to his knees. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He just stared at the place where his life used to be. A young woman grabbed his arm and pulled him. "Captain, we have to move. The gas is coming." He looked at her. She wore a medic's uniform covered in blood. Her name tag said. "My family," he whispered. "I'm sorry," said, tears running down her face. "I'm so sorry, but if we don't move, we die too." She dragged him toward the old mining shafts at the edge of town. Other survivors were running there too. Maybe 300 people, stumbling through the smoke and fire. The mines went deep underground. The bombs couldn't reach them there. The gas couldn't flow down that far. It was the only safe place left. For 3 days the survivors hid in the darkness. They listened to the sounds above, explosions, screaming, then silence. The worst sound of all was the silence. Worked without rest. She bandaged wounds, held dying hands, and recorded everything. She used her medical tablet to document what had happened, the names of the dead, the injuries of the survivors, the things they had seen. "Why are you doing that?" someone asked her. "Because someone needs to know," she said. "Someone needs to remember." On the fourth day, the sound stopped completely. On the fifth day, a rescue ship from Earth arrived. When the survivors climbed out of the mines, they saw what remained of their world. Every city was destroyed. Every town was burned. The green fields were black with ash. The rivers ran gray with poison. Of 2.3 million people, only 847 survived. The rescue workers were hardened soldiers who had seen many terrible things, but when they walked through the ruins of Nu, many of them cried. They found schools full of small bodies. They found hospitals where patients had been killed in their beds. They found shelters that they had sealed shut and filled with gas. This was not war. This was murder on a scale that even the cruel galaxy had rarely seen. Walked through the ruins of his home one last time. He found nothing. Not a photograph, not a toy, not even a grave. His wife and daughter had simply been erased from existence. He found only one thing, a small pink ribbon that used to wear in her hair. It was burned at the edges but still recognizable. He put it in his pocket and never took it out again. Across the galaxy, news of the massacre spread. The Galactic Council, a group of over 200 species, discussed what had happened. Most of them shook their heads sadly and did nothing. Humanity was young. Humanity was weak. Humanity had only 12 colony worlds and a small fleet. They had conquered dozens of species. This was simply how the universe worked. "Unfortunate," said the ambassador to the council, "but the humans were building on a world we had claimed. They were warned." This was a lie. There had been no warning, no claim, no reason. They had simply decided that humans were pests that needed to be eliminated. The council accepted this explanation. They always did. Power made its own truth. But on Earth, something different was happening. Admiral received the distress message in his office. He was an old man with a white beard and eyes that had seen too much, had served under him 20 years ago. He had watched him become a good officer, a good husband, a good father. Now was a broken man, and his family was ash. Read the full report. 2.3 million dead, 847 survivors, chemical weapons, no warning, no mercy. His aide waited for orders. She expected rage. She expected tears. She expected something. His expression did not change. His voice did not shake. He simply set down the report and spoke 3 words. "Call the assembly." "Sir, the full assembly." All of them, every representative, every leader, every admiral and general, everyone. "What should I tell them?" Looked out his window at the blue sky of Earth. Somewhere out there, beyond the stars, enemies thought humanity would weep and beg and die. They were wrong. "Tell them," said quietly, "that humanity needs to have a conversation about our future." The galaxy had made a terrible mistake. They had confused kindness for weakness. They had mistaken peace for inability. They thought humanity was soft because humans smiled and traded and built schools and hospitals. They were about to learn the truth. Humanity had never shown the galaxy what it could really do. They were about to find out. 3 weeks passed after the massacre of Nu. In that time, something strange happened. Human space went completely dark. No trade ships left human ports. No diplomatic messages were sent. No tourists traveled. No scientists attended conferences. Every human embassy across the galaxy closed its doors. When other species tried to contact Earth, they received only silence. Ambassador of the Meridian Collective watched this with great interest. He was old, even by his species standards. His people lived for 1,000 years, and he had spent 800 of them studying other civilizations. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had watched species destroy themselves with war and greed. "What are the humans doing?" asked his young assistant. "Grieving, perhaps," Al said, "or preparing to surrender." "Should we offer help?" Al shook his head. "Though would see it as interference, we must stay neutral." This was the way of the galaxy. The strong did what they wanted. The weak suffered what they must. The Meridian Collective had survived by never taking sides. But Al could not stop wondering. He had met humans before. He had found them strange. They laughed too easily. They made friends too quickly. They seemed soft and emotional compared to other species. Yet something about them had always made him uneasy, something hiding behind those smiles. He would soon discover what it was. Inside human space, the truth was very different from what the galaxy imagined. On Earth, every factory switched to military production. Ships that had carried food and supplies were stripped down and rebuilt with weapons. Scientists who had studied medicine and farming now worked on bombs and shields. Every human world did the same. It was as if a single mind controlled all of humanity. No one argued, no one protested, no one asked questions. When news of new reached the people, something changed in the human heart. Parents looked at their children and saw face. Workers looked at their cities and saw burning ruins. Soldiers looked at their weapons and saw purpose. Admiral had called the United Earth Assembly into emergency session. Every leader, every representative, every military commander attended. The Great Hall was filled with thousands of people, all waiting to hear what would happen next. Stood at the center and spoke. "You have all seen the reports. You know what happened. 2.3 million of our people were murdered without warning or reason. The galaxy expects us to cry. They expect us to beg. They expect us to accept this and move on." He paused. "I am here to ask you one question. What is your answer?" The hall was silent for a long moment. Then a woman stood up. She was a farmer from one of the outer colonies. Her hands were rough from work. Her voice was strong. "My sister lived on new," she said. "She had 3 children. They are all dead now. I don't want speeches. I want to know what we are going to do." Others stood. A teacher who had lost students, a doctor who had lost colleagues, a soldier who had lost friends. They all said the same thing. Finally called for a vote. The question was simple. How should humanity respond to the massacre of Nu? The vote was unanimous. Every single person voted the same way. It was the first time in human history that all of humanity agreed on anything. The resolution was one word: retribution. On a military base outside Seoul, Park was training. He had refused to rest. He had refused to grieve. He had only one thing left inside him, and it burned like a cold fire. Other survivors of Nu had come to join him. They were soldiers, farmers, teachers, engineers. They had all lost everything. They had all chosen to fight. They called themselves the Unforgiven. "We are not here for glory," told them on the first day. "We are not here for medals. We are here because there are beings in this galaxy who believe they can kill our children and face no consequences. We will teach them otherwise." They trained harder than any soldiers in human history. They learned every weakness, every battle tactic, every secret. They became weapons shaped by loss and sharpened by hate. But was careful. He knew that hate could make you strong, but it could also make you blind. He had seen what they had become. He would not let his people become the same thing. "We fight with everything we have," he told the Unforgiven. "But we remember why we fight. We fight so that no other child will suffer what our children suffered. If we forget that, we become no different from them." The soldiers nodded. They understood. In a quiet hospital room on Earth, sat before the Assembly's investigation committee. She had brought her recordings, the documentation she had made in those dark days in the mines. They watched in silence. Some looked away, some wept, some simply stared with empty eyes. When it was over, an old general asked her a question. "What do you want, miss? What would bring you peace?" thought for a long moment. She remembered holding dying children in her arms. She remembered the screams that still echoed in her dreams. She remembered the silence that followed. "I want them to understand fear," she said quietly. "I want them to know what it feels like, the way we knew it. Then maybe they will never do this again." And after that, looked down at her hands, the hands that had tried to save so many and failed. "After that, I want to heal, both them and us. But first, they need to learn that some lines cannot be crossed." She volunteered for the medical corps of the fleet. She would sail with the ships that carried death to them, and she would be there to pick up the pieces afterward. Deep in a secret military facility, Admiral reviewed Project Anvil. It was humanity's darkest secret. A contingency plan created 50 years ago, when humans first realized they were not alone in a dangerous universe. The galaxy thought humans had a small fleet of 100 ships. The truth was different. Hidden shipyards in asteroid fields had been building warships for decades. Secret research stations had developed weapons that no other species knew about. Training programs had prepared millions of soldiers for a war that everyone hoped would never come. Humanity had been playing weak. They had hidden their strength because they wanted peace. They had smiled and traded and made friends because that was what they truly wanted. But they had always been ready. 3 weeks after the massacre, the preparations were complete. 400 warships gathered at a secret location far from any inhabited world. It was everything humanity had. Their entire strength, held back for generations, now unleashed. Admiral stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Reckoning. It was the largest ship humanity had ever built, and it carried enough firepower to burn a world. "Open a channel," he said. "All frequencies. I want the entire galaxy to hear this." The communication officer nodded. "Channel open, sir." Had been silent for 3 weeks. He had let the galaxy wonder and worry. He had let them celebrate their easy victory. Now it was time to speak. "This message is for the Dominion," he said, his voice calm and cold. 3 weeks ago, you murdered 2.3 million of our people. You used chemical weapons on children. You gave no warning and showed no mercy. You did this because you believed we were weak. You believed we could not hurt you." He paused. "You were wrong." Around him, 400 ships powered up their engines. Weapon systems came online. Soldiers checked their gear. "We are coming for you now. We will not negotiate. We will not accept surrender. We will not stop until you understand the price of what you have done. Every soldier, every ship, every world will learn what happens when you touch our people." The fleet began to move, stars stretching into lines as they entered hyperspace. "Nothing will stop us. Nothing will be spared. We are humanity, and we are no longer smiling." The channel closed. Across the galaxy, every species heard the message. Ambassador Al listened with growing dread. He had studied humanity for decades. He had thought he understood them. Now he realized he had understood nothing. The soft, laughing species who loved peace had shown another face. Behind their kindness lived something ancient and terrible, something that had been sleeping. Now it was awake, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Dominion had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 4,000 years. They had conquered 12 species and destroyed 3 more completely. Their warriors were born for battle, their ships were the finest in known space, and their leaders knew no fear. When they heard the human message, they laughed. Dominant caste leader sat on his throne of polished bone and dismissed the threat with a wave of his clawed hand. His advisors gathered around him, their insect-like bodies clicking with amusement. "The soft skins are throwing a tantrum," said. "They lost a small colony and now they beat their chests like animals. Send a fleet to crush them. 60 ships should be more than enough for their entire species." His war minister bowed low. "It will be done, Dominant. We will bring you their admiral's head." "Bring me something interesting," said, already bored. "Perhaps some of their children. I hear they keep them as pets rather than soldiers, amusing creatures. The border fleet moved to intercept the human ships at the Epsilon Gateway, a strategic point between human space and territory. 60 warships, each one larger than anything humans had been known to build. Their commanders expected an easy victory. They found something else entirely. The human fleet arrived in perfect formation. Their ships moved together like a single organism, each one knowing exactly where to be and what to do. The commander opened a channel to demand surrender. No response came. They fired first, as they always did. Their weapons were powerful enough to crack moons. They had destroyed entire civilizations with these guns. The human ships did not even try to dodge. Their shields held, not just held but seemed to absorb the energy and grow stronger. Then the humans fired back. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Every single ship was destroyed. Not damaged, not disabled, destroyed, torn apart by weapons that should not exist, by tactics that made no sense, by a fury that burned cold and absolute. The humans lost 3 ships. 3. When the last vessel exploded, the human fleet did not pause to celebrate. They did not salvage the wreckage. They did not even slow down. They simply continued forward, deeper into space. They were not interested in victory. They were interested in something else entirely. News of the battle spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Ambassador Al read the reports 3 times, certain there must be some mistake. "This is impossible," his assistant said. "The humans should not have this technology. Our records show they have only been spacefaring for 200 years. They have 4,000 years of military development." Al shook his head slowly. "We made an error, all of us. We watched the humans trade and smile and build hospitals. We thought we were seeing who they were. We were only seeing who they chose to be." "What do you mean?" The old ambassador stared at the battle data on his screen. The human ships had moved with perfect coordination. Their weapons had been designed specifically to counter technology. Their tactics had exploited every weakness in doctrine. "The humans have been planning for this," Al said quietly. "Not this battle, not this war. They have been planning for any war. They showed the galaxy 10% of what they could do and hid the rest. They wanted peace, so they pretended to be weak." He paused. The just woke up a sleeping giant. The dominant finally stopped laughing. His war minister brought the news personally, trembling with fear. 60 ships destroyed in 11 minutes. The entire border fleet eliminated, and the humans were still coming. "Mobilize everything," ordered. "Every ship, every soldier, every weapon, 600 warships. We will crush them with numbers they cannot match." "Dominant, our intelligence reports suggest the humans may have more ships than we believed. Perhaps we should consider." "Negotiation," roar echoed through the throne room. "We are the Dominion. We do not negotiate with vermin. We exterminate them." The war minister bowed and ran to obey. But as he left, something cold settled in his stomach. He had seen the battle footage. He had watched human ships take hits that should have destroyed them and keep fighting. He had seen weapons that cut through armor like paper. For the first time in his life, he wondered if they had finally met an enemy they could not defeat. The human fleet reached its first colony world 7 days later. This was not a military target. It was a civilian world, much like New had been. Farms and cities and families. The population watched the human ships appear in their sky and waited for the bombs to fall. Admiral stood on his bridge and looked down at the world below. His finger rested near the firing controls. One word from him, and millions would die, just like millions of humans had died on New. It would be fair, it would be justified. Eye for eye, blood for blood. Was there, watching. She had come to the bridge without permission, but no one had stopped her. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone had seen her recordings. "What are you going to do?" she asked quietly. did not answer for a long time. Finally, he spoke. I want to burn them. Every day, every hour, every minute, I want to make them feel what we felt. I want their children to scream the way our children screamed. But that is not who we are, lowered his hand. Target all military installations on the planet. Power stations, weapon factories, communication centers. Leave the civilian areas alone. The officers looked at each other in surprise. Some seemed relieved, others seemed disappointed. Sir, one captain said carefully, they showed our civilians no mercy. No, they did not, turned to face his crew. And if we do the same, we become them. We become monsters who kill children because it is easy. I will not let that happen. We are here to end a threat, not to become one. The bombardment was precise. Military targets only. When it was over, the colony was defenseless but alive. Human ships moved on, leaving the population confused and frightened but breathing. The galaxy watched in amazement. They had expected humanity to burn everything. They had expected revenge without limits. Instead, they saw something strange, mercy in the middle of war. Park and the Unforgiven had no such hesitation with military targets. They landed on a military base 3 days later. It was the kind of base that trained soldiers for planetary invasion, the kind of base where tactics like the new Massacre were developed and practiced. The battle was short and brutal. Fought at the front, his weapon never stopping. He had trained for this moment for weeks. Every shot was precise. Every movement was efficient. He felt nothing but cold focus. When it was over, every soldier on the base was dead. The Unforgiven had not lost a single member. A young soldier approached as they surveyed the destruction. Sir, we found their tactical database. It has records of all their invasion plans, including new. Nodded, send it to command. Every piece of intelligence helps. There's something else, sir. The soldier hesitated. There are prisoners, officers. They're asking to surrender. Walked to where the prisoners were being held. 3 commanders, their proud faces now twisted with fear. They had never been captured before. They had never needed to surrender. One of them spoke, his translator making the words sound flat and mechanical. We claim prisoner rights under Galactic Convention. You must treat us humanely. Stared at him for a long moment. This being had probably ordered attacks on civilians, had probably laughed while children died. His hand moved toward his weapon. Then he stopped. He thought of his daughter, had been kind to everyone. She had fed stray animals and made friends with every child in her class. She had believed in goodness. If she could see him now, what would she think? Lowered his hand. Take them to the transport. They will be tried for war crimes by a proper court, not executed in the dirt like animals. Sir, the young soldier seemed surprised. We are not like them, said his voice hard. We will never be like them. That is why we win. The prisoners were taken away, stood alone in the ruins of the base, looking up at the alien sky. He was still filled with hate. He would probably always be filled with hate, but he would not let it control him. He would not let it turn him into the thing he was fighting against. The war continued. The human fleet pushed deeper into space. Every military target was destroyed. Every civilian center was spared. They could not understand it. They would have burned everything. Perhaps that was why they were losing. 12 days after the first battle, the human fleet entered the home system. 397 ships surrounded their weapons pointed at the heart of an empire. Dominant looked at the screens showing the human fleet and felt something he had never felt before. Fear. The soft skins had come, and they were not smiling anymore. They had never been threatened before. For 4,000 years, no enemy had ever reached this far. The planet was considered untouchable, protected by the mightiest fleet in the known galaxy. Now that fleet was scattered across space, broken and burning, and human ships circled the world like patient wolves. Admiral did not attack immediately. He established a complete blockade instead. Nothing entered the system. Nothing left. They were trapped on their own world, surrounded by enemies they had created. He broadcast a single message to the planet below. You killed 2.3 million of our people. We will not stop until you understand what that means. Then he waited. Dominant tried everything. He sent assassins. They were caught. He offered bribes. They were ignored. He threatened to execute human prisoners. The response came back cold and simple. We know you have no human prisoners. You don't take prisoners. Neither will we if you force us. Days passed, weeks, the blockade held. No food shipments arrived on Prime, no trade goods, no fuel. The great empire was slowly choking. The Galactic Council finally decided to act. 12 species sent a diplomatic fleet to the system. Among them was Ambassador Al of the Meridian Collective. He was the eldest diplomat in known space, and he had been chosen to speak for the Council. Their ships approached the human blockade and requested permission to pass. Admiral granted it, but only for a single shuttle carrying the ambassador himself. Al boarded the reckoning alone. Human soldiers escorted him through corridors filled with busy crew members. No one stopped to stare at him. No one seemed interested in galactic politics. They had work to do. Received him on the bridge. The old human stood straight despite his age, his eyes steady and unreadable. Ambassador said, "The Council finally noticed us." Al chose his words carefully. The Council is concerned about the scale of this conflict. We are here to offer mediation, to find a peaceful solution. Where was the Council when our children were being gassed? Asked. His voice was calm, but something dangerous lived behind it. Where was the concern then? The Council believed the account of events. We did not know. You did not want to know, gestured to an officer, show him. A screen lit up. Al watched recordings, the bodies, the gas, the children in their shelters sealed in and murdered. He watched for an hour, and when it was over, his ancient hands were shaking. He had seen many terrible things in his 800 years, but this was different. This was cruelty without purpose, death without meaning, evil that served nothing but itself. The Council demands that humanity cease hostilities, Al said, but his voice had lost its strength. They threaten sanctions, military action if necessary. Smiled for the first time. It was not a pleasant expression. The Council was silent when our children burned. They can continue their silence now. Go back to your fleet, Ambassador. Tell them what you saw. Tell them we will finish what they started. And tell them that if any Council ship interferes, we will treat them as enemies. Al returned to the diplomatic fleet. He told them what he had seen. He showed them copies of the recordings. The Council fleet without another word. They would issue no more demands. They would offer no more protection to the. Humanity was alone against an empire, and humanity was winning. Dominant made his final move. He gathered every remaining ship, 823 warships, the last strength of the Dominion. It was the largest fleet they had ever assembled. If it failed, there would be nothing left. We attack at dawn, ordered. We break their blockade and drive them from our space. The Dominion will not fall to soft-skinned vermin. The Battle of Prime began as the local sun rose over the. Ships poured out of defensive positions around the planet, guns blazing. Human ships held their ground, their shields flashing under the assault. For a moment, it seemed like the numbers might be enough. Then the human ships began their real attack. They had been waiting, learning. Every battle had taught them more about tactics. Every engagement had shown them new weaknesses. Now they used everything they had learned. Human ships moved in patterns that computers could not predict. Weapons fired at exactly the right moment to overwhelm specific shield frequencies. Fighters launched coordinated strikes that cut enemy formations apart. 4 hours later, it was over. 823 ships destroyed. The human fleet lost 89. The mathematics were impossible, but they were real. Among the destroyed ships was the Dominant's flagship, but it had not been killed. Human marines had boarded it in the final moments, cutting through its hulls with terrible efficiency. They found on his bridge, surrounded by the bodies of his guards. He had fought to the last, but it had not been enough. Park led the boarding party. He stood before the Dominant with his weapon raised, the cold fire inside him burning brighter than ever. "Kill me," said. "I will not beg." Did not answer. He just stared at this creature who had ordered the death of his family, who had watched children burn and felt nothing but satisfaction. He wanted to pull the trigger. Every part of him screamed for it. This being deserved death 1,000 times over. But's face appeared in his mind, her smile, her kindness, the way she had believed in goodness. "No," said finally. "You don't get to die a warrior's death. You get to live. You get to stand trial. You get to face judgment for what you did. And then you get to spend the rest of your life in a cell, knowing that everything you built is gone." Was dragged away in chains. Hours later, he stood on the bridge of the reckoning, forced to face Admiral. Human soldiers surrounded him, their faces hard with hate that they struggled to control. "What do you want?" demanded. "Territory, resources, slaves. Name your price and end this." Reached into his pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It showed a human child in a pink dress, blowing out candles on a birthday cake. She was smiling, her eyes full of innocent joy. Her name was Park, said. She was 7 years old. She wanted to be a scientist when she grew up. She was afraid of the dark, so her father always left a small light on in her room. Looked confused. What does this have to do with terms of surrender? Everything. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of worlds. She trusted us to keep her safe. We failed. You took her from us. There are no terms. Then what do you want? I want you to understand. Held up the photograph. This is not a symbol. This is not propaganda. This was a real child who will never grow up because of what you did. She will never laugh again, never learn, never love. She is gone forever and nothing will ever bring her back. For the first time, something changed in his face. Not guilt, not remorse, but perhaps finally understanding. Every species in this galaxy sees death, continued. But few understand loss. The kill without thinking about what they destroy. You count bodies, not lives. You see enemies, not fathers and mothers and children. He put the photograph away. That is why you lost. Not because we are stronger or smarter, but because every single human in this fleet is fighting for something more than victory. We fight for Park. We fight for every child who died on New. We fight so that no parent will ever feel what felt when he found his home in ashes. Was led away to a prison cell. He would be held until a proper trial could be arranged. Not a human trial, a joint galactic tribunal so that everyone could see justice being done. That night stood at a viewport looking down at the Concord. Found her there, his face tired but calm. We won, she said. We survived, he corrected. Winning will take longer. What do you mean? Looked at the planet below. Millions of lived there. Civilians who had never hurt anyone. Children who had nothing to do with the massacre. Killing them would be easy, he said. Burning their world would be simple, but then we become them. We become the monster we set out to destroy. He turned to face her. The hard part is what comes next. Showing mercy when every instinct screams for revenge. Thought about that. She remembered treating the wounded soldier and handing him over for questioning instead of letting him die. I treated one of them, she admitted. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than any surgery. Every part of me wanted to let him suffer. But you didn't. No, she smiled slightly. I didn't. That's why we're different, said. That's why we'll survive and they'll fade away. Not because we're stronger, because we remember how to be human, even when humanity is the hardest choice. Above them, the stars shone cold and distant, but for the first time in months, they did not seem quite so dark. The war was over. Now the real work would begin. 6 months had passed since the massacre of Nu. The war was over, but the wounds remained fresh. Now came the part that everyone had been dreading, the judgment. The Galactic Council established a joint tribunal to try the war criminals. Representatives from 40 species gathered on a neutral station to witness history. Humanity could have executed their enemies in secret. They could have tortured them for information. They could have done anything they wanted. Instead, they demanded a fair trial. Why? Asked a Meridian journalist who had been covering the war. After what they did, why give them justice? Admiral answered the question at a press conference. Because death is easy. Anyone can kill. It takes no thought, no principle, no strength. But justice requires all three. We want the galaxy to see exactly what they did and exactly how we responded. Then they can judge who was right. Dominant and 47 other leaders stood trial. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Video recordings, communication logs, survivor testimony, and the physical remains of 2.3 million murdered humans. Was called to testify. She walked to the witness stand with her head held high, her medical tablet in her hands. She had carried that tablet through fire and darkness. Now she would show its contents to the entire galaxy. She spoke for 6 hours. She described what she had seen in the ruins of Nu, the bodies of children in school uniforms, the hospitals where patients had been killed in their beds, the shelters that had become mass graves. She did not cry. She had used up all her tears long ago. She simply spoke the truth, word after word, until everyone in the chamber understood. When she finished, the tribunal was silent. Several judges had tears on their faces. Even, who had sat through the trial with cold disdain, seemed smaller somehow. The verdict took only 2 hours to reach. All 48 defendants were found guilty of genocide and crimes against sentient beings. The punishment was life imprisonment without possibility of release. Not death, life. Some humans were angry about this. They wanted blood for blood, but explained the reasoning at another conference. Execution would end their suffering, he said. Prison forces them to live with what they have done. Every day for the rest of their lives they will wake up knowing that their empire is gone, their power is broken, and they will never be free. That is justice. Humanity did not occupy they did not demand territory or tribute. They demanded only 3 things. First, they must formally acknowledge the Nu massacre as a crime against all sentient life. Not an accident, not a military action, a crime. Second, they must pay reparations to the survivors and families of the dead. Not to punish the people, but to help humans rebuild. Third, they must teach their children the truth, not propaganda, not excuses, the real history of what their leaders had done and why it was wrong. The new government, formed from the ashes of the old regime, agreed to all 3 conditions. They had no choice. Their military was destroyed, their economy was shattered, and their reputation was ruined. But more than that, many of them were genuinely ashamed of what their people had become. Park returned to Nu. The colony was a wasteland. Burned cities, poisoned soil, empty streets. But humans had already begun to return. Engineers worked to clean the atmosphere. Farmers tested the ground for contamination. Builders measured the foundations of ruined homes. Walked to the place where his house had once stood. The crater was gone now, filled in and covered with fresh earth. Someone had planted grass there. It was thin and struggling, but it was green. He knelt and touched the ground. His wife and daughter were somewhere beneath his feet. He could not find their bodies. The fire had been too hot. But he knew they were here, part of the soil now, part of the world they had loved. I kept my promise, he said quietly. I didn't become like them. It was hard. Every day was hard, but I remembered you, both of you, and I stayed human. He took out the pink ribbon that he had carried through the entire war. It was faded and worn now, but he could still see its color. He buried it in the earth, marking the spot with a small stone. "Rest now," he said. "I'll build something beautiful here, something you would have loved." Over the following months, he led the reconstruction effort. He worked alongside soldiers and civilians, farmers and scientists. They rebuilt new from the ground up, but they did not try to recreate what was lost. Instead, they built something new. At the center of the capital city, they constructed a memorial, a wall of black stone stretching half a kilometer, covered with names. Every human who had died in the massacre was listed there. Park's name was carved at eye level for children, so that young visitors would always see it first. Did not stay on New. She had different work to do. She traveled to Prime. The humans who had fought the war were shocked. Why would she go there, among the beings who had destroyed her world, but had her own reasons? "Hatred is a fire," she explained in an interview. "It keeps you warm when everything is cold, but if you keep feeding it, eventually it consumes everything. The house, the furniture, the walls. Then you are standing in ashes with nothing left to burn." She established a cross-species trauma counseling center on Prime. Her patients were both humans who had survived the war and who were struggling to understand what their civilization had done. Some humans called her a traitor, some called her a fool, but she kept working day after day, helping people put themselves back together. "I am not here because I forgave them," she told her critics. "I am here because someone has to break the cycle. If we only teach hate, their children will grow up hating us, and someday there will be another war, another massacre, more dead children on both sides. I refuse to let that happen." Her book, The Weight of Witness, became the most widely read text in the galaxy. It was translated into every language and studied in schools on hundreds of worlds. Generations of young beings would grow up reading her words and understanding what true strength looked like. Admiral retired from the military 1 year after the war ended. He had given humanity everything he had. Now it was time to rest. He spent his final years teaching at the Earth Military Academy. His classes were always full. Every young officer wanted to learn from the man who had defeated the Dominion. But his lessons were not what they expected. He did not teach tactics or strategy. He taught philosophy. He taught ethics. He taught the difference between power and strength. "Power is the ability to destroy," he told his students in his final lecture. "Any fool with a weapon can destroy. It requires no thought, no discipline, no wisdom. Strength is different. Strength is the ability to choose not to destroy, even when you have every right, even when your enemies deserve it, even when the whole galaxy would understand." He looked out at the young faces before him, the next generation of human warriors. "We had the power to burn we could have killed billions. We could have erased their species from existence and no one would have blamed us. But we chose not to. We chose justice over revenge, mercy over hate, hope over despair. That choice is what makes us human. That choice is why we survived." He smiled, the first genuine smile many of his students had ever seen on his weathered face. Never forget that. Never become the monster you fight. And never, ever stop believing that kindness is strength. Ambassador of the Meridian Collective wrote his final report on humanity shortly before his death. He had lived for 862 years, and he had seen countless species rise and fall. But humanity had surprised him in ways he never expected. "We wondered what humanity would become when pushed to their limits," he wrote. "Would they become monsters, as so many species have before them? Would they burn themselves out in the fire of their own rage? Would they destroy their enemies and then turn on each other? Instead, they showed us something we had forgotten was possible. They answered massacre with retribution, but they tempered that retribution with justice. They fought like demons and then offered peace. They won the war and then refused to become tyrants. They are perhaps the most terrifying and the most hopeful species I have encountered in my long life, not because of what they can destroy, but because of what they choose to preserve. Even in their darkest hour, surrounded by death and pain, they held onto their humanity. The galaxy should not fear them. The galaxy should learn from them. 10 years after the massacre, a child visited the new memorial with her school class. Her name was, and she was 12 years old. She had been born after the war, but she had learned about it in school. She knew what her people had done. She knew it was wrong. She walked along the wall of names, reading them one by one. So many names. So many people who would never grow up, never fall in love, never see their children's children. She stopped at Park's name. Something about it touched her. Perhaps the fact that it was at her eye level. Perhaps the small flowers that visitors had left there. Perhaps just the simple sadness of a life cut short. She took a small flower from her pocket, a gesture of apology. She placed it at the base of the memorial next to the human flowers. A few meters away, Park was working in a small garden. He had built it next to the memorial, a place of life beside the names of the dead. He grew flowers and vegetables, things that his daughter would have loved. He saw the child place her flower at the wall. He watched her stand there with her head bowed, her small shoulders trembling. He did not feel anger. The fire had burned out years ago, leaving only ash and memory. What he felt now was something more complex, not forgiveness, not yet, perhaps not ever, but something close to hope. He did not approach her. He did not speak. He simply nodded once, acknowledging her gesture, and returned to his garden. The sun set over new, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The same colors it had been on the day his world ended, but now those colors meant something different. They meant that darkness always ended, that dawn always came, that life, stubborn and beautiful, always found a way to grow again. Humanity had been tested. They had faced their worst nightmare and emerged with their souls intact. They had proven that strength and compassion could exist together, that power and mercy were not opposites. They had shown the galaxy what it meant to be human. And the galaxy would never forget.